Dizzy. He seemed like he was around forever, but the main releases of his games lasted only from 1987's Dizzy to 1992's Crystal Kingdom Dizzy. Still though, that represents 7 main series releases, one roughly every 9 months. But no wonder we thought Dizzy was everywhere forever, because that wasn't even it. There's another 5 non-platform adventure spin-off games with the characters, released in a little over 2 years between 89 and 91. We're here today to look at some of those less well-known titles. Fast Food. Dizzy was only 2 games old when this appeared. Written by the Oliver twins, which as mentioned isn't more than could be said for some of the later real Dizzy games, Fast Food is a maze game which isn't really a Pac-Man ripoff, but tries very, very hard to convince you that it is. For a start, there are 4 enemies. They are green, yellow, pink and blue. They have different personalities and names, stop me if you've heard this one before. The actual gameplay is where differences emerge. You're not clearing a maze as such, but simply collecting all the food, which worryingly also moves around the maze. I think I'd possibly suggest that burger is a little undercooked. Horrifyingly, the manual, alongside the enemies, also describes the personalities of the food, and I don't know which one is the worst. For instance, there's the pizza.
Pizzas don't mind being eaten. That's life when you're a pizza. They're fairly easy to catch.
I've never thought to ask a pizza's life goals before, but now I'm wondering if I've deprived quite a lot of pepperoni of the chance to go to university and train as a rocket surgeon just because it accepted its lot in life.
Burgers are blind, so they travel around the maze not knowing where Dizzy is. This makes them easy to eat.
Well, that's not disturbing at all. No one's asking what the burger's view is on any of this. They're just easy to hunt because they're always bumping into walls and no one thinks to fund guide chips for the blind burger.
Milkshakes are the easiest of all. They want to be drunk. They actually come to you.
Well, I am just glad I could help.
Chickens just don't want to be eaten. They're fast and they will run away from you. The only way to catch them is to head them off.
A reminder at this point that Dizzy is supposed to be the hero of this adventure. Quite apart from anything else, he's going to be a hero with severe food poisoning if the chickens are still able to move around when he eats them. And hold up, Dizzy's an egg. There are multiple questions raised by him eating chickens. I guess we've never specified exactly what kind of egg Dizzy is, but it's not like he looks like a quail egg or anything. So, that's murder and cannibalism. Tuck in, children. The weirdness is partially explained by the fact this was not a Dizzy game until late on. It was apparently supposed to be a marketing tie-in for the UK roadside diner chain Happy Eater, and was going to star their mascot, this Happy Chappy, who I'm sure would have absolutely killed any accusations of ripping off Pac-Man stone dead instantly. As to the quality of Happy Eater, UK viewers should merely consider that they were unable to beat Little Chef, and in fact were ultimately bought and closed by that chain in 1997. US viewers? Oh, I'm not even sure where to start here. Okay, imagine taking on Walmart in a most classy customers contest and losing. Given the game took all of 3 weeks total to write by all accounts, you wonder how a deal could be struck and fall through in that kind of time. The game itself is somehow really great. This is the CPC version, of course, and it's got some additional features like various condiments that affect the battlefield, as well as the classic shields, which in a coincidental and non-copyright infringing way do exactly the same as the power pill in Pac-Man. All this, combined with very dynamic maps, leads to quite an engaging game. There's 30 levels, and they're all fairly short, but there's scope for a much deeper game than Pac-Man here. For instance, the monsters can't pass through your food targets, so if you get it right, you can actually use them as shields. The power pill-like bonuses also sometimes move around the map themselves, and again, are solid. What's not quite solid are some of the thinner walls, which Dizzy alone can pass through, giving you an escape from pursuers in a way you don't normally get in Pac-Man. Some of the tight maps require all these skills, with the ghosts essentially having to be bypassed like you're playing the adventure game or something, using their AI to trick them into going up a passage that allows you to slip into a new area of the map by what might be the only route, and literally playing a game of chicken with a chicken. It's not a super hard game, I've seen over half of it already, and even resetting an entire level rather than just restarting you a la Pac-Man doesn't make it too complex. It blats along nicely though, rewarding you with a cute little sequence every 3 levels completed, which are very nearly as cute as the manual going so far as to call them cartoons. It's a laugh, albeit a slightly slow plodding one, but as a £3 budget game in 1989, I'm thinking Happy Eater missed out on a trick here in much the same way as they also passed on items like antibacterial spray and making any money. We know Amstrad Action liked this originally, because their review is quoted in the manual, Trent and Webb throwing the game a solid 87%. I can't disagree, really. The 16-bit ones are a little different, with recognisable locations, although an egg chasing a burger around a graveyard does rather feel like the kind of dream you have after eating entirely too much cheese. Alternatively, you could choose the Nintendo Switch reboot, yes, you heard that right, released late last year by the Olivers themselves as a lockdown distraction product. Quick snacks. Never once to let an idea that made money sit for more than 2 seconds, the next spin-off Dizzy was also a puzzle game with at least some Pac-Man-y overtones that involved Dizzy eating various foodstuffs. Luckily for us, in this one there is no danger of Dizzy eating his mum. Or your mum, another reason he's a unique character. It's mostly what appears to be fruit. The aim is pretty similar though, collect all the stuff in the level, don't get caught by the now more numerous but unnamed bad guys. The difference is now the level is dynamic. Don't like your route to somewhere? Create one. Virtually all the blocks can be moved to create a path and kill enemies. Weird thing though, is it me or is this somewhat uglier than the early game, at least in this CPC form? It's also got that needlessly cheap trick of having a control reversing power down, which lasts for ages and persists through deaths. In both the episode and my personal chronology, we spent way too long on fast food, and I just don't get the same draw here. This was apparently specifically made because it could be made quick, and even though development dragged on a bit, you do just feel the love wasn't there. Sure, they bashed out fast food quicker than their lunch order, but it feels like they bashed it out while giving a crap. This doesn't have the personality. A solid bit of 8-bit budget action still though. If this was your haul from the weekly trip to Boots, I don't think you'd resent it. Sadly, no connection to a failed UK chain in this one though. I was tempted to try and work in some tortured fake story about low-quality supermarket outlet quick save, especially as the fate of that was also to be bought by another company which then in itself collapsed. But I think that would have been even more niche a reference. Dizzy Panic. Pac-Man was many people's first video game. So how do you follow up a pair of knockoff Pac-Mans? Pac-Men? Well, that's simple. You knock off the first game of any type most of us ever played. This, the video game. You're intrigued, aren't you? You possibly shouldn't be. On their re-evaluation in this issue, AA gave Fast Food 66 and Quick Snacks 76. Panic Dizzy? 12. The duties here passed from the Oliver twins over to Big Red, who were already busy on the adventures by this point in the timeline. Too busy to write a coherent game, it seems. Panic Dizzy is as simple can be. Here's the start of the game. Shapes come out the tubes, you position the holes, and hit drop. If multiple shapes can be dropped, the game will do it for you. Clear enough shapes, as you can see from the thing in the top right there, and you go to the next level, where things get a bit quicker, and sometimes you get extra types of shapes. It's pleasingly mind-numbing, I guess. The most interesting thing about it, though, is, before I played it, I watched some of it on YouTube thanks to the glorious RZX archive. And it turns out that was the Spectrum version, which has one crucial advantage. Colour. The different kinds of shapes have their own distinct colour on the specky, and I suspect once things get very busy, you'd come very quickly to rely on that. Back on the CPC, it's all red. Very red. I don't know if this is a decision to benefit green monitor owners, but especially given the low resolution, and especially given you're going to be playing this on an old CRT, I'm not even sure you're going to be able to recognise all the shapes that quick. I'm not going to 12% this game, as it were. But if you're old enough to drink from a cup without a safety spout on it, you don't need to hunt this one down at all. Weirdly, for Baby's first game, it might actually be a good one, but it may not bode well that I had to use ancient footage of my under 2-year-old nephew a minute ago, because he's already well bored of the real life version. In any case, even if you do inflict this on your spawn, you'll want it to be the Spectrum one. The really weird thing though is, when Codemasters came to choose an adventure game and 2 spin-offs to put on that previously mentioned Game Gear compilation, they chose this over anything you've seen so far. In November 1993. I don't think I need to start listing what else you could be playing on a Game Gear by November 1993, but let me wave frantically at games like Columns and Mean Bean Machine for 2. Codemasters literally vetoed the Oliver's plan to use the then unreleased adventure game Wonderland Izzy on this compilation in favour of this. Wonderland wouldn't see a release of any kind until 2015. No wonder the twins and Codemasters parted ways shortly after. Bubble Dizzy. Now, this one I was dreading, and not just for the very clear downward trend in the games to this point. But no, I was dreading this one because I distinctly remember RoseTintedSpectrum looking at it and spending 8 minutes basically iterating every reason it doesn't work as a game, and fundamentally the wrong thing to even consider making in the first place. The premise here is pretty simple. A standard mainline Dizzy game consisted of, from most to least loved, some puzzle solving, some exploration, some inventory management, and a little bit of platforming. Bubble Dizzy transplants the platforming into its own game. That's like looking at a Gran Turismo style racing game, with its close racing, unbelievable speed, huge noise and spectacular locations, and thinking what people really want to play is a game where you spend your time changing the wheels and filling up the car with fuel in a dark garage. Okay, poor example. But Bubble Dizzy isn't just a Dizzy platformer. In fact, the actual platform controls are, if anything, marginally improved from the originals. It's not a bad looking game either, set entirely underwater, with no explanation as to how Dizzy doesn't immediately expire like he famously does in the main games. On CPC at least, it's got a grimy dark feel that's actually a touch opposed to the CPC's normal colour palette, and is quite effective. The problem is, it's simply not a fair game. Your inputs do not really correspond to your success. Let me back up. You're underwater Dizzy. The plan is to jump on the bubbles and ride them up to the surface, at which point you'll jump straight into another trench. There's enemies to avoid and solid platforms at the side in some places to stand on. There's an effective time limit dictated by oxygen melting away, which the enemies can also steal from you somehow. And it doesn't work as a game because your success is, to a huge degree, down to luck. Look, Rosie will explain it.
Bubbles are platforms. They are your key to getting to the next level. Do you know where the bubbles are going to rise? No. Do you know which bubbles are going to rise? No. To add more frustration to this, enemies are placed in your path, and honestly, for the most part, you just have to ignore the fact they're there. You can't do anything about it. If you move or jump out of the way, your bubble will pop, which means you'll just have to wait for another bubble to arrive in the exact place you want.
So you have to ignore the enemies and hope they don't kill you, because it's not like you can do anything really concrete to avoid them, since the vast majority of your movement will be external. And whether or not you can reach the next platform at any given point is sheer luck as to whether your bubble will hold up. And none of this translates to a satisfying game. In any given life, whether you succeed is pretty much entirely within the gift of the random number generator doing the bubbles, and it is random, something it's very easy to prove by rerunning the fun. You can see the idea, really you can. But you can't have a platform game with randomised destruction of platforms and a consistent target. It's just not satisfying. Even adding a flashing effect to warn you or a countdown somewhere could transform it, but right now I'm calling it a worse video game than Panic Dizzy. Because Panic Dizzy is something you can play with consistent rules, even if they're consistent rules my baby nephew can deal with. This? Failure is not your fault, and thus success, if it comes, is not your achievement. Dizzy Down the Rapids. This, the more savvy amongst you may have spotted, is not an Amstrad CPC game. This is the arcade game Toobin, which as a Brit I'm struggling mightily to pronounce in a way that makes you understand exactly how it's spelled. It's a 1988 arcade game by Atari Midway involving storming down the world's least friendly water park lazy river, avoiding enemies, collecting bonuses, and generally having a lovely time. It's the kind of thing that looks right for a well done home conversion, and indeed several formats, including our host, got one. And here it is. It's not perfect, but it's an admirable attempt. The control system is a little weird, involving you individually controlling your hero's arms, and the collision detection isn't what it might be, but by and large, the problems with this are also the problems with the arcade game itself in terms of being unfair, having a restricted viewpoint a lot of the time, and having collision detection which, to be polite, is not 100% spot on. Given the length of this section already, you might wonder why we're talking about this, but don't worry, we won't be here long now. 2 years after this conversion, Codemasters were sent a second knockoff conversion that I presume was bashed out in an afternoon. It shows some technical competence, and what a normal company would have done is hired the guy to do a proper project. What they did was slap the Dizzy name and character graphic on it, throw in some music and chuck the game out the door. It's awful. It's slow. The river is generally so narrow that avoiding enemies is impossible. It's a bad game. It might even be worse than Bubble Dizzy. At least Bubble Dizzy was just a bad design. The game actually played okay. This is awful. And even worse, it's an awful clone of something you could already pick up on Hit Squad. Technically, we're not even done. Another spin-off, Go Dizzy Go, was released for the NES and Game Gear in '92. It never made the computers, probably because it's very close to just being quick snacks again. But it's about here that Codemasters wisely decided that the character needed a rest, and Dizzy was never so prominent again. 12 games in under 5 years though. If only someone thought to give Bethesda or Rockstar that idea. This feature was taken from an episode of Yesterzine, the literal magazine show, where every month we look at a new magazine and pull out slices of history like this. To see them before the thumbnail clicking masses, simply subscribe to this channel and tune in last Friday of every month.